And we also notice we have on matching shoes.
Oh, it's great being here, seeing all these lovely faces, all of these ladies, and all. I'm surprised it's not. I was about to say, and always one in the corner. That makes you special, you know. That makes you special. You know, Tayari, you know, we're both Southern women. That's why I'm so addicted. Because we're Southern women. I guess of a certain generation. You're from Atlanta. I'm from actually Mobile, Alabama. And we both attended historically Black colleges and universities. And I just wonder, how much did your upbringing actually inspire Ken? Now, I know you can write anything. You have proven that to us. And we love how it all comes back home to Atlanta, right? But how much of yourself did you have to put, or not just even yourself, maybe your aunties and as, quote, your kin, you know, maybe folks that have whispered in your ear all your life and it just poured out of you this time?
Well, first, everybody, thank y'all for coming. This is actually the last stop in this 25 city thing I'm doing. So I'm so happy to wrap it up right here. It's been a long road, but it's been such a nourishing road to connect with readers. And I'm so grateful to my publisher for giving me so many tour stops in the South. So often writers, you write a book, they just want to send you to New York, up and down, you know, the Eastern Seaboard. But it's so important for me to be doing this at home. It was important to me that I write this book at home because I used to live in New York. I was living in New York because that's where publishing was. And I thought I needed to be up there to make my career. And when I was up north, I always knew that New Yorkers are like they're born, not made. I never felt like a New Yorker. And I feel like the South is so misunderstood up there. Like when I lived in New York, you know, they acted like I got to Brooklyn on the Underground Railroad. And so I wanted to come home and write, you know, a true story of the South as I know it to be.
And they act like it's not 49 other states.
Well, they act even like the whole rest of New York in the city. And because I do think that when northern people are provincial, people don't call it that, right? Like they can proudly say, I've never left New York. And no one tells them, oh, you need to get out more. But if you were to say, oh, I've never left North Carolina or I've never left Alabama, people would think your world is small.
Right. Yeah.
And our worlds are large. And I have that's always been part of the mission of my work, is to write about the sheer breadth and wonder and scope of our Southern lives. That said, you know, this is the only time I've ever written a book where I felt like the book snuck up on me. Because I thought I was going to write something. I'd like to write books about the modern day. That's what I think of that as kind of my mission, is to write, you know, the story of the world that I know. And that's what I've always done quite happily. And I had a contract to write a book about the world that I know. And for whatever reason, I couldn't make it happen. It wasn't
good for us.
It wasn't moving like it. I felt like I had like a hammer, nails, a saw, and I was making noise when I was supposed to be making music. And I had to just let the story come to me. And that's how I ended up writing about these two girls in the 1950s growing up in a small town. And I thought, well, maybe these are the parents of the people I'm supposed to be writing about. Because these characters, you know, are my mother's era. Mm-hmm. But when I got about 150 pages in, I had to accept that this is not the backstory. Mm-hmm. This is the real story. And I just had to kind of go with it. But you know how I feel writing a novel is a lot like being in love. You know how when you're in love, you're just busy being in love. You're just carried away by it. You can't say why you're doing what you're doing, but you just got to do what you're doing. And you think it's mysterious, it's above you, it's moved, you know, it's motivated by your heart, this mysterious thing that you can't understand and you shouldn't understand. That's how it felt writing this book. But I feel like just like being in love, when you are no longer in love, you can look back on your behavior and have some theories as to why. And that is the answer to this. I look back on this book and I can see why I wrote it. I moved back home to Atlanta because I wanted to be closer to my parents. They're in their 80s. And I wanted to be closer to them, not just to take care of them, though I do, but I want this to get to know my mother as two grown women. Like me and Mama, we are two grown women now. Because when I lived elsewhere, I come home to visit, I would be sleeping in my childhood bedroom. And there's stuffed animals in there. There's only so much grown woman conversation people can do when one party is sleeping in a room where there are stuffed animals. So I moved home, I have my own house, no stuffed animals. And I wanted, even in the book, the character, her aunt pours a drink and say, okay, finally, we can talk like grown women. Yes. And I thought my mama was gonna do that. And I realized that is merely my fantasy. My mama has no desire to be two grown women. She's like, you better get in there with them stuffed animals. And I feel like on some level, this book is me having the conversation with that generation, whether they want to or not.
So I have to ask you, has your mother read this book or listened to, folks have told me, the lovely audiobook version of this book? What did she?
Oh, my mother, she read this book. She enjoyed this book. She don't want to talk about this book. She's not mad about it. That's just not how she is. And that's the thing I think you have to realize. You cannot make somebody have a conversation with you they don't want to have. And so I think I just wanted to write this book to say, what was it like coming of age in the 50s? What was it like coming of age against the backdrop of the civil rights movement? Because all the things we think about, they thought about. They just may not talk to us about it, but everything, work, love, sexuality, all of these things, friendship, they felt these things as deeply as we do. Like, I think every generation feels like we invented humanity. Like, we think don't you think every generation thinks they invented sex? They think everybody else before them were hatched from eggs, and then we came up with this novel idea. But so I'm kind of just filling in the blanks and answering my own questions.
You brought up Underground Railroad. I know some of your Spelman sisters are here. I saw a few shirts out there. And so one part of the book I definitely I enjoyed just the mention of how one of the dorm rooms on the first floor, 104, it wasn't just a regular, it was the Underground Railroad. So I wondered, did you take the Underground Railroad when you lived in the dorm? Did you sneak out?
We had curfew when I was at Spelman, but in the 50s, when the novel was set, the curfew was 6 p.m., y'all. The sun was still out. Like, we would be out, it would be too late now. And so, and if you live in a situation where there's a curfew for girls, one, you have to bond with other people, because if you're going to circumvent that curfew, somebody's going to have to open that door for you. Right. Someone else is going to have to put themselves in harm's way to help you, to help facilitate your good time. See, that's friendship. And so there's a room on the first floor of Abbey Hall where you can sneak in more effectively. And they used to call that room, that window, we called the Underground Railroad, because you could sneak in the house, sneak in the door, and whoever lived in that room was known as the conductor.
Yes. I don't think you said that you used the Underground Railroad during your curfew years.
This is like off subject. When I was there also, the curfew was midnight. And for a young lady on weekdays, so a young lady with my background, that didn't feel like any kind of curfew at all. You could be out till midnight on a weeknight. I was like, where is the curfew in the room with us? Because I don't see it.
Okay, I understand. But just the mention of Spelman, historically Black colleges and universities, just the role that these schools played, in the civil rights movement. We know most of them were in the South. Those schools at that time especially, they were like the promised land to your, it's like if you could just get there, then your life would be changed, your life would be better for it. So I wonder if it just kind of had to tear your heart apart to let one of your characters use education to get out and the other one not.
This book I felt like this idea that to be able to go to college, in the 40s and 50s was such a rarefied gift. Like, it would not be likely that two people from a unlikely background would be able to do it. But I had a fun time writing Niecy, going to college, it's a whole new world. And she, for the first time, encountered a sheer diversity of Black people when she went to college. Because at the historically Black colleges, then as now, you have people in their first generation in their family to go to school. And then you have people who have had education since Reconstruction. And that could be your roommate, which is what happens to Niecy. She ends up with a roommate who's from a much more privileged background than herself. She didn't even know such people existed. And that is a way that her world grew. But Annie's world grows in a different way. So Annie goes off to Memphis because she has heard through the grapevine that her biological mother is there. And she climbs out the window of her grandmother's house and, goes on this, this grand adventure. So while their lives were very different, I don't know whose life is richer, because that is a very rich experience to climb out the window, get in a car with this dude named Clyde.
The man that you thought was your man is not your man.
I know,
that was very problematic.
Yeah, well, when you're 17, what's your man? Who knows? You're teenagers. And you go for a wild goose chase, and all they have to guide them is the Green Book, which is the book for Black travelers that tells you where it's safe to stay. Now, the fine print of the Green Book is the Green Book tells you if a place is safe. That's it. Anything else, that's all they're telling you. This is safe. They're not telling you if it's nice, if it's reputable. They're just saying that you will survive the night. Everything else is up to you. So they go on this, just the uncertainty and the fun of it. So Niecy takes kind of a safer route. It's a more privileged route. But you're on a wild goose chase, you going on a road trip in a rundown car with some people you don't really know. Y'all end up staying in a sharecropping whorehouse for 8 weeks. That's interesting.
Definitely interesting. I don't think I would have been there, because if Clyde had a woman in that front seat, I would have beat his ass. I would have never gotten to Memphis.
No, because she wanted to go to Memphis. And that's the thing too, like even as a very young person, keeping one's eyes on the prize. And also for me, in writing a novel, I feel like you have to separate like what your ideal self would do and what a real person would do.
That's why I'm a journalist and not a novelist.
You've been waiting your whole life to maybe meet your biological mother, and you have a ride to get there. Yeah, and you take it. You take it.
The civil rights movement, it was so clever. The way that you just really introduced Vernice to something that she definitely wasn't aware of, but just the back and forth. Like I thought I was sitting, in the front of the back, not the back of the front. Like she didn't even know what she was doing, but it kind of gave her some street credibility once she got to Atlanta.
Well, I think a lot of people, the nature of resistance, right? We often think of the civil rights movement as these grand moments of resistance, like Mrs. Parks was part of a resistance organization and they decided that she would not give up her seat on the bus this particular day. But people were constantly negotiating ways to find dignity in a system that is undignified. And Vernice decides that she knows she's going to travel to school on a segregated bus, but she wants to sit in the frontmost seat that is allowed to her. But the way that how the bus seats can be toggled, so instead of being like this, they're kind of like that. And so she's unsure what, the line is unclear. Because just like the nature of segregation and racism is arbitrary and ridiculous and unclear. And so she accidentally sits in the wrong part of the bus and becomes kind of an accidental activist in this. But the question too is, even if you did not mean to make that particular statement, if you suffer the consequences of it, are you not still a hero or not? Like, how much is your choice or intention, is it as important as the results And I feel like many of us live in these kind of gray areas. I don't like to write about heroes necessarily. I like to write about real people trying to figure it out.
Well, that was very special to me, just this accidental activist. It took her new Spelman sisters to say, well, guess what you did? Now I'll talk to you. Now you've done something. Now you're worthy.
Well, I mean, it happened once she met them, so it's not like they had a time when they weren't talking to her.
I know.
But they took a undermine our sisterhood up in here. Not in this month of April, our Founders Month. April 11th is right around the corner, which we celebrate our sacred sisterhood. So
I was trying to make her.
But I feel like she got there, and then it became this thing to say, oh, that's the one who wouldn't get off the bus.
I know.
And she felt like, well, kind of, you'll get, and it gives her, don't you think we all went to school and found out something about ourselves that made us special that we didn't know about? Like when I went to college for the first time, people said, oh, aren't you the one that likes to write? And I was like, why, yes. It was my first, it's like in college, the rules are different. Like when you're in high school, it's a very narrow way of being consequential as a high school student. But when you get to college, it's the first time that you, particularly as a young lady, that there are many ways that people can know who you are.
You can remake yourself.
Yes.
You can pretend to be, you can be whoever you want. That's what I liked about it.
Yeah, you can become someone new. So she goes there. I really enjoyed writing about that time of her, the wonder.
Yes.
Of being like almost grown. Almost grown is the sweet spot, right? You're grown enough, but you're not quite grown, so you can get some help.
I want to talk about the letters and your choice in bridging stories that way. How important? Well, we know it's not like they had a cell phone or anything else to communicate. You had to write it down and make sure you had an address and that you found a place where people could write you back. A lot had to go into getting a letter to someone and then hoping to get a response.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, now we have this expectation of instant communication.
Yes.
Like if someone doesn't text you back in 5 minutes, do you or do you not have an attitude?
They're gone.
You're like, you saw that. But when people were writing, in the 50s, people would write letters and you would wait. And also as a device in a novel, it was a lot of fun to think about. It was a lot of fun to look at the life one is living and then the way that one reports one's life in the letter. So when Annie is over there having to live in this sharecropping whorehouse in Mississippi, when she finally gets the stamp and everything to write her grandmother, she says, I've met a very nice woman. She owns her own business. They are staying at her place.
She's like, how dare you? Wait a minute. You did not say goodbye. You're forgetting the good stuff. Both of them actually were upset they didn't put the good stuff in the letter. They're like, you think somebody's going to read the letter?
Yeah, you write a letter, and then you have to wait for them to write you back. And also, as a novelist, don't you think you can cover time in a different way? You can do it because without a letter, it doesn't make sense to have a 3-page synopsis, of what all happens. But in a letter, it's realistic that someone would provide a synopsis of their life.
Are you a letter writer? Were you a letter writer?
I am a letter writer. I love to write letters. I even belong to pen pal societies. I write to people I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
I know. When I was a little girl, I had, they would, I don't know if they do that with children anymore. They would assign us a pen pal, took it very seriously.
I had a pen pal in Trinidad, actually.
And then when I was 12 years old, my parents moved to West Africa for reasons of their own. And as a child, you have to go where they go. Right. So I wrote to my little friends every day. And it wasn't until I had been there 3 months that I received a first response. Because think about it, the letter had to get all the way back to Atlanta. Then my little friends had to say, this is odd. What do you do when someone sends you a letter? And their mother had to say, oh, you write them back. And they had to say, okay. So then they write back, and then they have to get all the way back to me. And I just remember that day. But I did it for the pleasure of the writing, because I didn't have expectation of getting anything back, because I didn't know how it worked. And one day, each class has a student that's kind of almost like the class president. They call that person the prefect. The prefect came in with a shoebox full of letters from me from all my friends. They all came at once. And that after that, I was hooked on my life as a letter writer.
So there was no question you were going to include that in this particular book? What made you do it?
This book was so mysterious because of the way it came to me. I never had a book come to me before. I used to didn't believe people who would say, oh, this book just came to me. I'm just a vessel. I'm like, are you really? You're a vessel? Okay. Because I thought they were just trying to seem interesting. But it actually happened to me with this one. Like I felt like this story came through me in the form that it wanted to come. And it was very humbling for me to just kind of almost like shut up and write it. Like I had to just allow that kind of humility. So when they started writing letters, I was like, okay, I guess we're writing letters.
Well, before we have to open it up to you all, I know there's so many questions out there. Just talk about motherhood, because that was definitely present all the way through in the beginning. I think that's why I have to keep putting the book down, because it's like, ugh, I don't want to think about my mother. I don't want to think about my aunties. I don't want to think about any of this right now. I say, where's my book? Let me keep reading to see what happens next. But I mean, just to begin a story, I don't know how many of you all were just like, really? 2 motherless girls from the get-go? Like, you hit us in the stomach early, Tayari. You did it.
I think this book is kind of funny. Who's read it already? It's kind of funny, right? This book, a lot of funny things happen to these people. Yeah, this book is kind of funny. There's so many. Bobo is funny.
Oh, a lot of people love
Baby Doll is funny.
She's like Lulabelle.
Lulabelle is funny. There's a lot of funny people in this book. I feel that, I think because the book, because it's set during Jim Crow era, people are like, oh no, but it's very important to me to capture all
murder.
I'm sorry, are we trying to sell this book or not? I'm just saying, we want, but I do think there's this expectations of books by African Americans to be stories of tragedy. There is this expectation that your story is one of woe. And I really try to write a complex story. So our girls are motherless, which to me gives it a kind of almost like a fable-like quality. And that's what bonds them, is because the 2 of them don't have their mothers. And so they have this thing in common, and they are marked as, oh, those are the 2 motherless babies. And it makes them a community of 2 and a friendship. And Annie, her mother has run off. And so she lives her whole life with the hope, oh, one day I'll see my mother. And one of the questions I'm interested in is, what is the utility of hope? Because on the one hand, we think of hope, as it's a positive virtue. But as one of the characters says, Annie wakes up every morning hopeful, but she go to bed every night disappointed. Where Nisi, her mother's died before she was born. And so she knows that she'll never see her mother. So she's not searching for that specific person. She's searching for that mother role, but she doesn't have it tied to one person. So I feel like Annie, if you imagine Annie, she's sitting at a beautiful table and it's set for dinner and there's a seat beside her and she says, no one can sit at this seat because this is my mother's seat. And then she goes so far to say, and nobody else can eat till my mother gets here. That's because she doesn't want to almost like cheat on the idea of her mother by allowing someone to sit in this seat. And it made me think about our own lives and our own mothers, even if we have our mothers. Motherhood is a role that we so romanticize and fantasize about. Are we comparing our real life mothers to this imaginary mother? This imaginary mother that knows you so well and is there for you when you're unhappy. And how can a real life person live up to the fantasy? So it's really also a story about learning to feel the love that is right there in front of you and not hold out for someone that doesn't even exist.
You mentioned Bobo. So now we have to go, really just moving from the relationships with mothers and women. And I wonder how many of you, I was trying to get as far away from my mother I think, early on, and then I guess when I went off to college, I was like calling her every day. She was like, "Goodness, you act like I breastfed you or something." I mean, she was like, "What happened?" And so that's when you mentioned, this fantasy, people dream about what a mother should be, and sometimes you have something and you don't even know it. We're gonna go to Bobo. So, was there a character that you just kept rooting for the entire time, Tayari, in the book? Especially when you think of these love relationships that were growing.
I like all the characters. I cannot write about characters if I don't like them, because I have to spend so much time with them that I can't spend. I only have one character in this book that I kind of dislike, and he's got a very small role because I just got to spend too much time with them. The bar owner, Mr. Wilson. Yeah. But other than that, I like all the people, and I want things to work out for my characters. But I had fun. I had so much fun writing the men in this book because I believe that Southern Black Americans are masters of language, and the further removed people are from power, the more they play games and twist the language and make new words and new expressions. And of the Black people who are, I think, most colorful and interesting, Black men are fantastic with the words. They are so good with the language, with the expression. So with Bobo and all his vocabulary words that he uses side by side with the more vernacular language, I had a lot of fun with that. I had fun with Mr. Daniel, the other bar owner, and all of his off-the-cuff formality, yet very Southern, very Black. I just had a great time with the way the men talk to each other and the way they relate to women, and the idea of the way people try to be gentlemen, even though they're in a culture and a moment in history that doesn't want them to be gentle. They try to be courtly in their own ways. And I just had such fun with that. And also writing about all this, like, 1950s va-va-voom, people were enjoying themselves in that way as well. And I had just writing those love plots was just a pleasure and a delight. And you can't have a love plot in a story without having some heartbreak.
True. That's true. Well, thank you for all of it. The love, the heartbreak, the semi-trauma, the beautiful characters. And we love Ken. That's why everybody's here. So let's give Tayari Jones an applause. I know there's some questions out there, plenty of questions out there. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask them. I don't know if we're giving people the mic. If there's another microphone, Alex, I don't know if they're going to stand up and